Hello again guys, welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video here at the House of Devlin. Thank you very much for watching this video, and this is a continuation of our Nordic mythology series here on the House of Devlin. Now, this particular video is a video that I'm hoping will be clearing up, at least clarifying certain points that are often misunderstood by the majority of people out there, and that is the subject of giants. Who were they? What were they? And what did they do? And why were they a necessity? Even though they were considered by the mass majority, if not of all people and gods, to be destructive and very, in many ways, bad things, bad gods, that why were they still tolerated? Why were they seen as an essential part of the life cycle? And that's what this video is going to be considering. Within the video, I will be giving you the names of all the main giants that we know of. They were probably other giants, but that, you know, they're either minor giants that are forgotten about, or there are very little texts describing them, so it's hard to find out about them. But before we go on who the giants are, I mean, I give you their names and give you a rough description of what they are and what they represent. We need to talk about what the giants are. Now, the word giant today in modern society means something big, something of grand stature and size and strength. You know, you could describe the actor, well, he's a strong man actually, he's an athlete, Hafthor Bjornsson, who plays the Mountain in Game of Thrones, as a giant, or a giant of a man at the very least, because he's the best part of 7 foot tall and he weighs 30 stone of muscle. That's a big man, and you would not be wrong to describe him as a giant under the modern definition of giant, okay? But giant is a bastardization really of multiple terms that were kind of brought in together, and old terms were forgotten or replaced with new words and so on and so forth, as is the thing of language. Language is a man-made thing, and it evolves with society. It changes, even if it's still known. And like English, for example, if we went back 1,000 years ago when English was still spoken, most of us who speak English today probably wouldn't understand people who spoke English back then, even though it's really in theory the same language. Language evolves, okay, and it has to, okay. There's nothing wrong with this, but I'm just pointing out how you can immediately misunderstand what the giants were, because when we say the giants in Nordic mythology, even myself, my mind immediately begins to think these gigantic behemoths, essentially, that of grand stature, size and strength, and I think, wow, they're going to be these big creatures. But the mass majority of the giants were of human size, or they were certainly the same size as the other gods, like Odin and Freya and Thor, and these were just basically man-sized gods. And the mass majority of the giants were of that size. Some of them were very beautiful, some of them were very ugly, some of them were massive. Jormungand, the Midgard serpent, for example, he was huge. He could wrap himself around the entire world and bite his own tail. Ymir, he made Midgard. When he died, Odin used his body to create Earth, essentially. Midgard, the realm of men. He was massive, but the mass majority of them were human size and human in appearance. Okay, and so where did this word giant come to describe them? It seems to be a misleading term. Well, the reason is the original word to describe, or one of the original words to describe this group of gods, okay, because they were a tribe of gods. They were a tribe of gods that were equal in power to both the Vanir and the Aesir. In fact, they were equal in power to the Aesir-Vanir alliance. They were very powerful gods. But the original word for them was Etin. And that means, in its oldest roots, devourer. So they were devourers, consumers, and they were seen as a purely destructive force. Essentially, they were the forces of destruction, entropy, and decay. And so they were that was how they were seen, and they were feared. They were feared, much like the how you can imagine most people would be afraid of demons in modern society if they're of religious within the main faiths out there. You'd be terrified of a demon, or the concept of a demon coming. It's that same fear that existed in the ancient Nordic people towards giants. They were seen as purely malevolent and destructive forces. However, because ancient paganism was a polytheistic religion, as are pretty much all the paganistic belief systems out there. In fact, I think all of them are polytheistic. I certainly have never heard of an exception to that. When you have a polytheistic religion, you don't have the simplicity of good and evil, black and white. It doesn't exist. You have gods that are, you have creation and destruction, as I've described in previous videos. You have gods that are like human beings. They're neither good nor evil. They have good traits, they have evil traits or bad traits, but they have the majority of their personality somewhere in the middle, made up of all the middle bits. And so the gods of ancient paganism, including the giants, were complicated beings that didn't just act in a destructive way because, well, that's what they were supposed to do, because they were evil. They did it for a particular reason. They had their own personal motivations behind it, and these motivations varied between each of the amongst each of the giants. They each had a role to play. They each had a certain ambition or long-term goal. Some of them were very bestial in nature and were purely destructive, but the majority weren't. And obviously we'll discuss, I'll do a video on every single giant that I name here today, and I will discuss in detail what their motivations were, what their ambitions were, why they acted the way they did. And you'll find that actually some of them were actually quite good gods. They weren't evil in any way. They weren't like the rest of them, but they're still of that tribe of gods, and so they are coloured as such. They are seen as being part of that destructive pantheon that you don't want to pray to. I mean, let's put it this way: there has been found in archaeological studies and that evidence of prayer and, you know, creation of symbols and idols towards Odin and Thor and Freya. So there's active worship going on towards these particular gods, the members of the Icea and Vanir tribes. There are no such religious symbols or evidence of proof of worship of the giants. You didn't worship giants, just in much like today's society in say a Christian country. It'd be a rarity to find someone worshipping the devil or worshipping demons, genuinely doing it as well, not just because, like they listen to rock music that talks about the devil. That's not Satanism, okay? Genuine Satanism. These are rare members of society. I'm not saying people didn't exist, that people who didn't believe in and worship the giants. There probably were some people who believed in the destructive forces. Well, not believed, they all believed in it, but worshipped the destructive forces. There probably were a few, but they were very much the minority. Right, now, Etten, as I say, was the original word for them. Devourer. How did it become giant under modern language? Well, in 1066, England was invaded by William the Conqueror, and he defeated King Harold, who was the king of England at the time, and who was an Anglo-Saxon. And he took over England. William the Conqueror took over England as a result of his Battle of Hastings and further conquests. And he became the King of England and shaped England into what it is today. That's essentially when modern England was formed. However, William the Conqueror was French. I mean, you wouldn't have described him as French back then because the country of France didn't exist. He was a Norman. Okay, he was from Normandy, which was a Viking settlement within the north of France. But they did speak what is essentially French, the older version of French. And when they conquered England, their language got mixed up with ours. The nobility tended to try and speak our language, but they tended to mix their own words in with it. And so the word géant was used to describe the giants within the paganistic belief systems that weren't really around back then, but still existed to some degree. And the word géant, I mean, it sounds like giant, right? You can see how it became giant under the English tongue. But the word géant back then meant giant, but it meant specifically, it was a direct reference to the titans of the Greco-Roman religion. Okay, and so the titans were the old gods within the Greco-Roman religious system, and they were very similar actually to the giants within the Nordic paganistic system, in the sense that they were the destructive forces, that they were the oldest of the gods, the oldest of all the tribes. The giants were the oldest tribe of gods to exist within Nordic paganism. The very first god to be created, unless you count Sut and Ordhumbla, which were more just creative and destructive forces in essence. But the oldest god to be created and given life and awareness by Ordhumbla was Ymir, and he was a giant. And he was a giant as well. He was massive. He was huge. But that, as I say, they were very similar to the titans within Greco-Roman belief systems, and so that's why they were called géants when the Normans came over and conquered England, and that is how these days. That's why we know them as giants, but really we should call them ettins or devourers. Okay, as I said, they were a tribe of gods. They were a very powerful tribe of gods. And when we say tribe, we mean it in the same way that we describe a human tribe. That is a group of people who share the same blood and work together towards typically a common goal, because they are family. They are like a clan, a tribe, or a pantheon, essentially, in this case, with the gods. And so all of them shared the same original genealogy, which was Ymir. They all heralded from Ymir. And they were typically more of pure giant blood than anything else, because they were half giants. Giant blood did get around and about quite a bit, so we say. Odin was half giant himself. Okay, Thor was 3/4 giant, believe it or not. So, you know, giant blood was found even amongst the Aesir and Vanir tribes. They were not themselves pure Aesir or pure Vanir. They did have elements of giant within their bloodlines. Not every one of them. Some of them were pure in their genealogy, but giants themselves were typically more pure than the Aesir and Vanir. They were 100% giant, a lot of them. Now, or very close to 100% giant. Now, the way that shall I just give you the names? We've discussed what are the giants. We've understood the term that we give to the word giant, or ettin, or devourer. Now we know what they are in essence, and we've discussed briefly that they were seen as the destructive or entropic forces of decay. These giants were essentially the forces that tried to drag the world that had been created, the world of order, the world of creation, back to the primordial chaos that existed prior to the cosmology myth, where there was just basically Gununganap, and that was it. And they tried to drag it into there, and not because they're trying to destroy themselves and the whole world and all that. But as I say, because they all have their own individual ambitions, but overall they are destructive in nature. They do have a predisposition to being destructive, and with a balance of forces with the Aesir and Vanir, basically what they did is just keep them in check. The Aesir and Vanir alliance was one was seen, well, they were seen as the protectors and benefactors of civilization, essentially, and they were very much more, on the whole, creative forces, the protectors and paragons of virtue and creation, and their actions kept in check what the actions of the giants, which were typically destructive in nature. It doesn't mean that giants weren't creative in their own way. It didn't mean that the Aesir from time to time didn't get destructive. They did kill things also, but on the whole the Aesir and the giants kind of balanced out, and there was for the rule of Asgard, which is what essentially we're in at the moment, where men are still around on Midgard and all the rest of it. The rule of Asgard was a period of neutrality, and it still is a period of neutrality. But when there is an imbalance between creation and destruction, when destruction suddenly seems this balloon where it suddenly goes out of control, that's when Ragnarok comes. And obviously at the beginning there was an imbalance towards creation. Creation was far more in prominence than destruction. So you see the creation of the 9 realms, of the birth of the gods, the birth of men and women, the birth of Midgard, all these, you know, and Asgard itself, all these things. At the beginning, creation was, it's like an equation, and the equilibrium was towards creation at the beginning, but at the end the equilibrium shifts towards destruction. But in the middle there's a sort of even balance between the two. They're both going on at the same time. Creation is a continuous process, but destruction is a continuous process also. And that's why the giants were tolerated. The giants were a necessary evil in many respects. And I don't like using that word evil to describe the paganistic belief systems, but they were a necessary part of the life cycle, or the cyclical cycle of destiny. And they had to be tolerated, and the gods knew it and men knew it, and that's why they were never hunted down and they were never attacked outwardly, you know, like there was never a war until of course Ragnarok itself came, where they're starting to get unchecked, where destruction is getting, hey, it's getting over to, it's too much destruction going on now, we can't make up for it. Okay, now one of the interesting things that I will mention now, just before I give you a list of the gods that were considered to be giants, or were giants, is ourselves. We were created from 2 trees, from within the Midgard realm. Okay, when I say we, I mean humans, man and woman. The first man was called Ask, and he was from an ash tree. And Embla was the first female, and I think she was created from a birch tree, if I remember correctly. Now, Midgard, that's the realm that we live in, Earth, essentially. Every part of it, the trees, the sky, everything, comes from the body of Ymir. Odin, Vili and Ve, during the cosmology myth, kill Ymir, who was a giant, 100% giant as well. He was the very first of the giants and the father of all the giants. The giants were born from his sweat, believe it or not. But we ourselves are created from the trees, and the trees was his hair. So what does that make us? We are 100% giant ourselves, just in a different format. And that would describe, I suppose, in many ways, why many people would say in today's society that men and women are cruel. Men and women are overall destructive. Yes, we have some great capacity to do great acts of goodness, and we create life. Women give birth, we create families and stuff like that, but war exists. And perhaps this reflection of Ragnarok and creation, maybe Ragnarok is symbolic for our own destruction, in the sense that we will continue to live until we destroy ourselves maybe in a nuclear war or something. It's just a parallel that you can draw. But essentially what we're saying is we are 100% both the sons of Ymir and Odin. Odin created us. He was the one who gave us life. He was the one who carved us from the trees and put into us our spirits, essentially our self-awareness. But the physical nature that is us is 100% giant. An interesting point. Just to end, because I'm about to run out of storage on here, so I don't want to get cut off early. The Devourers, the Ettins, the Giants, the ones that are out there that I will be covering in future videos are Fenrir, a bestial beast essentially, who is very important within Ragnarok. Skadi, Ymir, who I've already mentioned. Hel, Jormungand, I always struggle to... Midgard Serpent, always pronounce his name silly. Surt, he was a fire giant. Most of these were ice giants, but he was one of the few fire giants. Nidhogg, Skull, and Hati. Those were the sons of Fenrir who chased the sun and the moon around the sky. Aegir and Ran, and Garm. And they're the ones that I'm going to be talking about at a later date. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found the video interesting and educational. Feel free to put in the comments anything that you want to add that you think I missed, because obviously I can't cover everything. I'm doing this all from memory. I do have some notes just to give me a little bit of structure to this particular video, but as you can see, I'm working from the top of my head. So if I've missed anything or I've made a mistake, please correct me. Or if you have additional knowledge that I haven't got, please feel free to share it, because this is what this particular series is about. It's all about educating each other about the old religious belief system of the ancient Nords, and also the Celts, because they had a similar religion, and it's always nice to know what your cousins, so to speak, believe in, because the pagans of old, even though they were different tribes in their own way, just like the giants, the Aesir and the Vanir were tribes, separate tribes. They all came from the same stock, essentially, and that's what pagans are. If you're a pagan, we all come from the same stock. It doesn't matter if you're Wiccan, Nordic paganist, Celtic paganist, Zoroastrianism, is it? We all come from the same stock, essentially. So let's all help one another out and be one big family. Alright, I'll see you then, guys. Bye-bye.